Hey everyone, welcome back to my channel. Today I'm going to show you how to create an energetic electric projectile effect using the Niagara System in Unreal Engine, and I'll guide you through creating your own electric texture using GIMP. The texture that I'm using for this project is going to be available for free download on my Patreon page, so you can either grab that there to follow along or create your own using GIMP. This effect is fully customizable, and by the end of this episode, you'll know how to adjust it so that you can adapt it to match your project style and needs. Don't forget, if you find this video helpful, please give it a like and subscribe to the channel. Your support enables me to keep creating these tutorials. And remember, my Patreon supporters get exclusive access to the full project files for this tutorial and many others. So if you want to save some time or dive deeper into the project, check out my Patreon page. So let's go ahead and get started. To begin with, we'll look at this is the texture that we're going to use here. I'm going to use this for our electric effect. It's nothing special. I just drew some wavy lines and then used GIMP to manipulate it and do some smudging and some blurring and um, pretty basic texture here, but I'll show you how to create something like this and make it tileable using GIMP. GIMP's pretty good, free open source software that you can use to edit or create textures. So definitely recommend using it if you're needing to create some textures. And what you'll do, go to File, New, set your ratio. I want to do 1024 by 1024, and we'll get our image here. You want to set this to a black background, and then I'd like to just grab the brush and first let's do uh, some highlights here. And you'll have to play with these settings to get kind of the look that you want. Um, and I'm not going to spend a lot of time on this. So you can pause it and make the texture that you want, or kind of just come back and do it at a later time as well. Just to show how this works, I want to draw just some lines in here. Nothing special, not trying to do anything too crazy. And if I grab the smudge tool, right click that, you can select smudge or blur. We can actually use both of these, but I'm going to start with smudge, and let's increase the size and just do something like that. And you can start moving some of this stuff around just to make it look more natural, or moving these in all kinds of cool directions and get unique looks for your textures. Doesn't have to be perfect, and in fact, if it's not perfect, it's almost better, looks more natural. So just kind of smudge stuff around, get a nice custom texture here. And again, you can see I had some pretty ugly lines that are now starting to look like a pretty cool texture. And actually, what I did here is I actually went up and down, and I would actually rather this be left to right for what we're going to do. So I'm going to go to Layer, Transform, and I want to rotate this 90 degrees. So this would be a good left to right texture here. But right now this won't be scalable just because of this hard cutoff here, and this isn't going to match up here. So to make this tileable, we want to go to Layer, Transform, and Offset. And we want to offset the width by half. So if we do by width half, then we kind of offset and shift our image here. And this will let us go through and edit this and kind of get rid of that hard line right down the middle. So as this pans through, you don't see where it changes. And to do that, I'm just going to grab the smudge tool again right here. And I'm just going to smudge some of these lines across. Make sure there's no kind of hard lines. You can always try to connect some lines like that as well. And then through here, doing the same thing. Another thing you can do, you can right click here and grab your blur, and you can go and blur some of this as well, just to get rid of any hard lines. And now this will be tileable. There's no real hard lines visible. So once you get something like this, You can go ahead and save it as a PNG or export as PNG and then import that into your project. For what I'm doing, you'll need that. Do the same thing, get a smoke texture, and then this texture is just an 8 by 8. It's kind of, it looks like it's not square, but it's in fact actually just doing little squares like this. So this is an 8 by 8 image here of lightning. So you can go through and draw this, or I actually got this online from a generator. This will be for free on my Patreon as well. So if you want to download this to follow along, feel free. Or just try to create your own and just get some random electrical images in an 8 by 8 grid. And we're going to send this through a flipbook. To start, let's go ahead and start working on our material. So I'm going to right click and do a material. And the first one I'm going to call lightning. Actually, I'm going to call this lightning tail. And in the lightning here, I want to set my material blend mode to translucent and shading to unlit. And first I want to grab a particle color, and off my RGB, I'm going to do a multiply here. And then this is going to get plugged into emissive color. Same thing with alpha, come off here and do a multiply here. And this is going to go into my opacity. And the thing we're going to multiply by is a radial gradient. So I'm going to plug that into both of these. And you can kind of see what that is already doing here. This radial gradient, we're going to, inside the UVs, we're going to pass our texture and all of our parameters and stuff through that. But first I'm going to right click and get a dynamic parameter here. And on my fourth parameter here, I'm going to name it density and plug it into here. And this will let us change these parameters inside of our Niagara system. So let's go ahead and work on what's going to plug into our UVs here. I'm going to grab a texture sample. And this I'm going to set to that lightning. And I'm going to go ahead and come off this and do a multiply. And I'm also going to run this through a power. So let's do a power. And I kind of know where I'm going to put this. So I'm going to go ahead and change it. Well, I'll leave it for now and we'll watch how that gets affected in a little bit. But what I want to do here, because we can already kind of see our lines here. And if we lower this, we can see some harder lines. So I want to pass this through a mask. So I'm going to do a text coordinate. And I'm going to do a mask. And this mask, I want to just be the R, which will give me a gradient in the left to right here. So I'm going to uncheck my green there. And this would be the gradient being faded on this side, but I want it to fade on this side. So I'm going to do a 1 minus. Then I'm going to plug that into my multiply. And we can we see a little bit of that gradient there. And as we change this number, we'll start to see that even more on this side. So if we plug this directly in without the 1 minus, it'll be on this other side. But again, we want it to be like that. The next thing we want to do is we want this texture to move. So I'm going to come off here and grab a panner. And for the panner, we're going to do quite a few things here. On my speed, let me get an append vector. I'm going to plug that into here. And I'm going to hold 1 and click and grab a constant and plug that into my Y. And then I also want to get a multiply that I'm going to plug into my X. And the reason I'm doing this is I'm going to hold 1 again, get a constant, and I'm going to set this to always be in multiples of -1 for what I'm doing here. And that's just so it'll go in the negative X direction. And I'm going to plug a dynamic parameter into this so that I can control the speed inside of my Niagara system. So I want to grab a dynamic parameter. I know I'm going to use U for this top one, V for this, and then I want to control the speed with my third parameter here. So I'm going to plug speed into this node. The next thing I want to do is affect the coordinates here. So I'm going to get text coordinates. I'm going to get a multiply. And on this multiply, I want to be able to affect the U and V separately. So I'm going to grab another append vector. And I'm going to plug my U into A and my V into B. And then if I plug this in here, we would be able to change our U and V separately inside of our Niagara system. But before we do that, I'm going to do an add and a saturate here, and then plug that into my coordinates. And we'll give ourselves some more room. And the thing we're going to add here is we want another texture to overlay on this to give some noise. So I'm going to grab another texture sample here, and off of my red, off of my red here, let's do a multiply. And I'm going to plug this into this add. And this texture, I want to select that smoke. And this is going to be some noise that's overlaid. And you can actually see as this texture passes over our noise, you can see where it's kind of cutting some areas out. But we don't want this noise to be static. We want it to move as well to give a more dynamic feel. I'm going to go ahead and multiply this by 0.2 so it's not as hard of a noise over it. If you go really high, you start getting more cutout, and really low is even less. 0 if you want to turn it off. But I want to do about a 0.2 to get that kind of motion there. We also want to do a panner off of this so that it's moving and it's not static. And for this panner, we're going to do actually the same thing we did here. So I'm going to copy this and paste it down here. And I'm going to plug this into my speed. For this one, though, I actually want to have my this multiplied by 0.5 instead of -1. And I'm going to plug the same speed into here so that they both move at the same ratio. And this will actually do it for our material. Kind of complicated. Hopefully you were able to keep up. I will scroll back through this. Let me clean it up just a tad bit. Scroll back through this so you can pause it and make it if you need. So feel free to pause it at any point and um, fix your texture if you need or your material. I'm going to go ahead and close this one down for now. And I'm going to make another material here, a lot more simple material. And I'm going to call this electric. And let's open that up. And inside electric, again, we're going to set blend mode to translucent and then unlit for shading model. And for this one, I want to grab a texture sample, and I'm actually going to set this one to that lightning 8x8 grid. Let's go ahead and grab a particle color. And on this, I'm going to set this or send this through a power. And then this is going to plug directly into emissive color. This power I want to be able to change inside of our Niagara system. So I want to grab a dynamic parameter. And let's set the second parameter to power and plug that in. Next, let's come back down to our texture sample here. And I want to grab off the red here and want to multiply this by a radial gradient. Go ahead and plug that in. And then I'm going to send this through a power as well. This power, I'm also going to use a dynamic parameter for, but I'm going to create a new one, and I'm going to call this opacity. And I'm going to plug this right into that power. And then I'm going to send this through a saturate. Next, let me give myself some more room here. I'm going to grab that same particle color again, just to keep it clean and not drag lines down through here. And I'm going to come off this alpha here. I'm going to multiply it with this. So do a multiply and plug that into the alpha. And then we're going to saturate this again. Here, I'm also going to do a depth fade. And I know I want to set this to something like 50, but we can always come back and adjust that if we need to. And this is going to plug into our opacity. And if we jump this number really high up, we see that it fades everything out. If we start coming down, it comes back. So really, this is pretty good just to get some fading around the edges and stuff. So I just want to go like 50 for now. The other thing that we can see all these little lightnings, and we don't want to do that. So if we come off of our texture and grab a flip book, not on the results though, so break this and go UVs. And off of this, we want to set the number of rows and columns. So I want to grab a constant. And since this is 8x8, it's the same. We can plug this into rows and columns and then set this number to 8. And then we get just one that it's flipping through at a time. This is definitely too fast for what we want. So off this animation phase, I'm going to come off of here and do a divide. And I'm going to divide time with a dynamic parameter so that we can affect this inside of our Niagara system. And I'm going to call this flip speed and just plug that in there. And that's going to do it for this material as well. So again, I'll just scroll through this so you can pause it and recreate if you need. So we can go ahead and save and close that one. The next thing we're going to do is jump into a Niagara system. So I'm going to right click and do a Niagara system. And I'm going to do an empty system here. and name it lightning projectile. The first thing I want to do is I'm going to get rid of sprite renderer on this. Let me rename this to electric ribbon. And I'm going to remove the sprite renderer and add a ribbon renderer. For this, I want to set this to that lightning tail material. The rest of that should be good. The emitter state, let's go ahead and set this to self and infinite. Let's add a spawn rate here. And for the spawn rate, I'm going to give this something like 200, but you might need to adjust that later if you don't like the way this is going to look. For the initialized particle, I'm going to give this a direct set of 0.5. I'm going to direct set the color, and I want kind of a bluish purple for this. So I'm going to do that. And then for ribbon mode, let's direct set this, and I'm going to set this to 80 so that we can see this inside of our preview here. I'm going to do an add velocity and fix those issues. And I'm going to do linear, and I'm going to do 1000. So there's our ribbon that we're looking at, and you can see it kind of fading off here. Let's go ahead and add that dynamic material parameter. And here I'm going to do 1, 1, and 1 for the density. And for the speed, if it's 0, then it's not moving. We can go really fast. But I'm going to do something like a 2 for now. The next thing in the particle update, let's go ahead and do a scale ribbon width. And for this, I want to set this to a float from curve. And I'm going to do this ease in, but I want to, you can play with this as well. I want to take this a little higher, so it comes a little higher as it goes back. And that's going to do it for our electric ribbon. The next thing, let's go ahead and add a new emitter. And just going to do an empty here. And this is going to be our electric. I'm going to call it electric 1. Again, for emitter state, do self and an infinite. Let's give this a spawn rate. And I'm going to set this to 80. And on my sprite render, I'm going to set this to that electric material. If we go to initialize particle, for life, I'm going to do a random. And I'm going to do this in between 0.3 and 0.7. I'm going to direct set the color. And I'm just going to do a really emissive blue here. For sprite size mode, I'm going to do a random uniform and 40 and 150. And then for the sprite rotation mode, I also want to set this to random. Let's go ahead and add a shape location on here. And I'm going to do 50. And you're starting to see our electric here. To get this to look a little better already, let's go ahead and add that dynamic material parameter inside of our particle update. And I want to set the flip speed to 1 for now. And I want to set the power to 1 as well. And then the opacity, I'm going to do a 1.5. The higher this opacity goes, the less it shows, so the more it fades it out. So if you do real low, it's real bright. And if you do real high, it is nearly non-existent. So just find the number that you need for whatever material you're using here. With the flip speed, the higher we send this, the slower it flips through those animations. So again, play with that number to get the look that you want. For this, I'm going to leave mine at 1 for now. The next thing, in our particle update, let's go ahead and grab a scale sprite size. And I want to do an ease in on this. Next, let's do a sprite rotation rate. And for this, I want to do a random range float. And I'm going to do from -1 to 1 so that I can rotate either way. Let's add a drag just to make this a little more natural. And I'm going to set this kind of high. Let's go ahead and add a scale color. And for this, for the alpha, let's go ahead and say float from curve and do the smooth ramp down. I'm also going to add a gravity force. And for this, I want to do a random range vector. And I want this to kind of spread out as this goes through the air the longer it's alive. So I'm going to do a -1000 and 1000 so that it kind of goes out over time. And for now, that's going to do it for the first electric. So let's go ahead and add our second one. So let's do an add emitter empty. I'm going to name this electric 2. Again, with the emitter state, self and infinite. Do a spawn rate again. And setting this to that 200. For the initialized particle on this one, I'm going to do a random and 0.1 to 0.5. Going to direct set this again as well. And for the random uniform on this one, I want to go from 100 to 150. And again, random with that sprite rotation mode. I'm also going to grab a shape location for this and setting that to 50 as well. And then let's go ahead in our particle update and grab that dynamic material. And, or for our sprite render, actually, we need to set that electric again. And now in our dynamic material, I want to set the speed to 0.5. And let's see for the opacity, do the 1.5 again. You can play with the speed also if you want it to be slower. I'm going to do 0.5 for now, and I might come change that a little bit later. In my particle update, let's do a scale sprite size or a scale color. Again, we'll do float from curve on the alpha and then just that linear ramp down. Now let's do a scale sprite size. Again, I'm just going to do a linear ramp down on this one. Add a curl noise and fix that issue. For the curl noise, I'm going to go 250 on this. And then I want to, under renderer, I want to add a light renderer as well so that this kind of glows on stuff that it passes by. So I'm going to do something like that. And the final thing that we're going to make is the actual just sprite kind of ball that is going to be at the center of this. So emitter state, again, self and infinite. For the spawn rate, let's do spawn rate. I'm going to do 250. On the life mode in the initialized particle, let's do a random and 0.1 to 0.2. I'm going to direct set the color mode, and I don't want this to be super emissive, so I'm just going to do a small number here. I'm going to do a uniform for the sprite size mode, and I'm going to do 50. Sprite rotation won't matter on this one since we're leaving a sphere. And let's do a scale sprite size and just do a linear ramp down on this. Let's do a scale color. And again, on your alpha, I'm going to do a float from curve and that linear ramp down. And then I'm going to add a curl noise. I'm going to do the same 250 on this. And that's going to do it for our effect here. I do want to come and turn off the add velocity to the electric ribbon so that it's not showing right here. So this is going to be our effect before it's moving. Next, let's go ahead and set up our projectile. So I'm going to right click and do a blueprint actor. And then that electric projectile. And then let's open it up. In here, I want to add that Niagara particle system. With that highlighted in the asset, I'm going to select the lightning projectile, and I'm going to uncheck auto activate. I also need to add a projectile movement, and that's going to do it for this blueprint. Let's do one more blueprint here, and this is also going to be an actor, and I'm going to call this shooter. And inside of here, we want to jump over to the event graph. And I'm going to do the same thing that I've done in a few of these, where I do a set timer by function name. No, it's not letting me delete those. Uh, but for the set timer by function name, I'm going to do every 2 seconds and select looping. And I'm going to add a custom event here and name that spawn. And then put that event name here. So it'll call that function. And the thing we want to do in spawn is come off of this and say spawn actor from class. And the actor we want to spawn is going to be that lightning projectile or electric projectile. And then we need to set the spawn transform here. So grab your default scene root and out of here, or you would actually set this to whatever you want this to shoot out of. But since I'm just doing this, I'm grabbing this default scene root and say get world transform. And then I'm just going to plug that directly in there. And now that we're spawning this blueprint, then we can get all of the parameters that we need out of it. So I'm going to say get Niagara. And at the bottom, you can select get Niagara. And here I'm just going to say set active. Connect that and check the new active and reset. We can also get that projectile movement here. And on the projectile movement, we can now set the physics that we need. So I'm going to say set velocity. And I'm just going to set this to shoot in the X direction. So I'm going to give this 1,000 in that direction. And off our projectile movement, I also want to change the gravity. So I'm going to change the projectile gravity scale. And this is a scale of Earth gravity. So 0 is 0, 1 is full Earth gravity. I'm going to leave this at 0 so our projectile isn't affected by gravity. Next, I'm just going to pull my shooter out here and go ahead and run this and see what it looks like. And there's our projectile. A lot of things you can change about this, the tail length or how far the electric's coming off the back. And to adjust those two, you'll come in here. The spawn rate will kind of affect the density. If you do a shorter life, if we do 0.1, and same with the electric, if you do shorter, 0.1 to maybe 0.4 here, then you'll start seeing shorter tails like that. So if you want just a small electric effect there, and maybe that ribbon tail is too short like that, but you can come back and maybe set that to 2.5. And that looks pretty good too for a short little electric effect. One thing to note, if you say we shoot this at twice the speed, then what happens is our tail is actually twice the length as it was. So if you're going to give this the ability to shoot at different speeds, you'll actually need to set these lifetimes to user parameters, and you'll need to take the life that you wanted and divide it by the ratio of the speed that you're increasing. So if you go multiply this by 2, then your lives need to be divided by 2 so that the tail stays the same length, unless you want the tail to get longer as it shoots faster, which could be what you want for your project. And that's going to do it for this episode, where we created this electrifying projectile effect using the Niagara System and our custom texture that we made in GIMP. Remember, you can tailor this effect to suit your specific needs, adding a jolt of excitement for your game. If you'd like to save time or you're having trouble with this project, the full project files are available for download on my Patreon page for exclusive tier members. If you found this tutorial useful, please go ahead and give it a thumbs up, subscribe to the channel, and hit the notification bell to ensure you don't miss out on any future episodes. Your support here really makes a difference. For more resources and to become a part of this community, please check out my Patreon website and Discord channel, which are linked in the description below. Thanks for watching. As always, happy developing, and I'll see you in the next one.